Welcome to the Faculty of Management Science, Bachelor of Business Administration. Our course unit is Business Communication Skills, and we are looking at Module 1, which is Introduction to Communication Skills. Your lecturer is Buyera Saidi, Senior Lecturer, Department of Management Science. This being our first lecture, it is very important that we start with looking at the course objectives. Objective 1 is understanding communication. Objective 2, differentiate between interpersonal and organizational communication. 3, discuss the functions of communication. So at the end of the lecture, you should know all those. What is communication? As you can look before you, we have two people who are trying to communicate. Communication is the transfer and understanding of meaning. A transfer means the message was received in form that can be interpreted by the receiver. Understanding the message is not the same as the receiver agreeing with the message. There must be always a sender of the message and a receiver of the message. Once the person receives the message and he understands what the message is all about, then there is communication. Minus understanding, there is no communication. If you talk to somebody who doesn't understand your language, you are not making any communication until that person understands what you're talking about. Interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication is communication between two or more people. As you can see, the young man and the young lady here are trying to communicate to each other. This one is asking a question. Do you know? After a very long discussion, this one say, yeah, I now understand you. By this one saying he understands, then there is communication taking place. And it's interpersonal because it's between two people. Organizational communication, this is where all the partners, network, and systems of communications within an organization occur. Let's look at functions of communication. There are basically 4 functions of communication, as you can see in this module. We have control, motivation, information, and emotional expression. Let's explain them to some detail. Functions of communication I explained, as you can see before you. Number 1 is control. This is formal and informal communication, which acts to control individuals' behaviors in organizations. People are given information to act towards correctness. That is control, a very big function of communication. 2, motivation is another function of communication. Communication clarifies for employees what is to be done, how well they have done it, and what can be done to improve performance. If you perform well and you get 90%, and your teacher tells you, excellent work, keep it up, you are motivated to work hard and harder and maintain a high grade. Emotional expression, social interaction in the form of work group communications provides a way for employees to express themselves. Whether you're happy or unhappy, you are able to actually emotionally come out and understand that today this person is very happy, maybe because he has actually been promoted to a higher rank in an organization. Information is another function of communication. Individuals and work groups need information to make decisions or to do their work effectively. Minus information, you may not be able to do some work. This could be maybe a timetable, it could be a schedule of work, it could be perhaps a time when you're supposed to report in office. It is important. So these basic 4 functions of communication should be clearly understood because they could actually form part of our coursework at the end of this lecture. What is interpersonal communication? Explained in detail. We have a message. The message, the source of the message is the sender, intended meaning. That is the message. Sender's intended meaning. According, the message is converted to symbolic. It's converted to, I beg your pardon. The message is converted to symbolic form. Then the channel, the medium through which the message travels. It could be written, it could be face-to-face word of mouth, it could be through maybe some symbol. All that could be the channel. And decoding, this means the receiver's translation of the message. Okay. Noise means disturbances that interfere with communication. Even switching off light could be noise. If you can obstruct somebody understanding what is being communicated, that is actually noise. Noise does not mean shouting only. It can mean any kind of disturbance or interference into the communications that's taking place. Let's look at interpersonal communication process. Basically, we have a sender on your left and have a receiver up on your right. The message is initiated by the sender, and the sender will actually try to actually encode the message correctly, and then choose a medium or a channel to which the message will be transferred to the receiver. And the receiver here will decode the message, try to understand the meaning of the message. And after understanding the meaning of the message, he will give a feedback to show that I've understood the message. Their communication will be complete. However, as communication occurs, there is always noise, which is distortion. It interferes with communication. It will actually make communications very difficult. Distortion in communication will occur when there is message decoding. The effect of the skills, attitudes, and knowledge of the sender on the process of encoding the message, trying to actually understand the meaning of the message, but there could be a distortion, a disturbance. Sometimes could be social cultural systems of the sender. Some people don't like people talking to them while standing. So in a way, if you send a message to an older person and you're a young person and you're standing, according to his culture, he may not actually pay attention to you. And therefore, he may not understand the message and there will be a distortion in our communication. The message, a symbol used to convey the message's meaning, may be difficult. If it is difficult, then you not be understood. The content of the message itself can also actually cause distortion. If the content is not interesting, people will not actually understand you properly. The choice of message format. Should I shout? Should I whisper? Should I talk calmly? My intonation also matters, the kind of voice that you are using. Noise, as I've said before, it is interfering with the message or distorting communication. The channel we are using also can actually affect or distort communication. The sender's choice of appropriate channel or multiple channels of conveying the message. Am I using TV? Am I using telephone? Am I using word of mouth? Am I using a loudspeaker? If it's not clear, then the message will not be actually received properly. The receiver can also distort his own communication. The effects of skills, attitude, and knowledge of the receiver on the process of decoding the message may also actually affect or distort the message. The cultural system of the receiver. The receiver may be having his cultural background, which may not actually be compliant with the way the message is being sent. Last but very important about distortions is feedback loop. How the communication is sent back to show the sender that was received. Once the receiver understands the message from the sender, he automatically or she automatically becomes a sender again because he has to actually give a feedback. So the feedback loop will show whether the person has understood or not. But if there is distortion, then communication may not actually be clear. A communication channel distortion affecting the return of the message from the receiver to the sender will also affect the message or distort the message. For instance, I talked by word of mouth, and then you use sign language which is not known to me. I may not be able to understand what you're talking about. So interpersonal communication methods are several. And here are some of them. I will briefly explain them, then you can make further research that can help you to do assignments that are actually in this course unit. Face-to-face is when two or more people come and look at each other as they communicate. Telephone, we use technology of a phone and call a person who may not be close to you, but he can get the communication through a phone. We can also have group meetings where people can come together and meet. As you can see down on your right, there's a group of young people who are having a meeting. While you're standing, they're strong enough. They are actually having a group meeting. A formal presentation could be something like I'm doing now. It can actually comprise of several face-to-face formal presentation. A class having a presentation from the teacher, from group members, all that. Memos can also be communication. Memos could be internal message that is actually being communicated to people to complete a given activity. Okay, it's a kind of reminder that is sent within the organization, intended for only internal use. The messages you see, like in your university, the administrator can release a memo reminding you to clear the fees areas, and it is signed by the person who is sending. It normally has a head, a sender, and the receiver is put. It could be to all, it could be to a particular department. A traditional mail, this traditional mail is outdated at the moment, but it's good for us to understand it. Somebody picks a paper, writes to another person, puts in an envelope that he written letter, then takes it to the post office, and it is taken either by plane or bus to another city, to another country. It could take several days. A long time ago, it could even take months. Traditional mail has been replaced by email, so it's no longer functional. It's completely outdated with the event of improved technology. Employee publications, an organization like a university can have magazines that publish certain issues. It could be maybe coursework, curriculum, and so on. And these publications are a form of interpersonal communication. Bulletin boards, like our university could have the pen pushers who write certain information, the science club, the history club, the agriculture club, all these could do form interpersonal communication methods. Audio and video tapes. Right now, I'm giving you a video tape that you'd use to listen to several times and understand what is meant by communication. Audio has no pictures. Video tapes has a picture, like this one is a video tape. You can see the lecturer and you can hear the lecturer, so it's both audio and video tape. You are able to understand the lecture through this. It's a kind of interpersonal communication. I, the teacher, and you, the learner, you are able to understand what I'm talking about through my audio and tape. We have hotlines. Hotlines are phones you can call minus spending money on your phone. They are normally used by security, health. For instance, if there's an emergency like fire outbreak, the hotline for the fire agency in this city is 999. Okay, maybe if there is a sick person, an ambulance, there is emergency number 123. You call that, it's a hotline. Even if you have no credit on your phone, this phone will actually respond and you will be helped. Those are called hotlines. Electronic mail replaced the traditional mail. This one you are able to actually access and communicate to the loved ones, to your bosses, to your juniors by simply typing electronically, and by click, the messages are dispersed to the person to whom you want to communicate. It's the most modern and effective way of communication we use nowadays. computer conferencing. We come together and use a computer, and we are able to actually have our deliberations using a computer in a very simple way. A voicemail, we can save a voice, particularly in our phone cells. So that's when somebody comes to pick your phone and wants to call you, it gives him or her information about why you are not unable to talk to him or her at that particular time. Perhaps you are in for a meeting and you can leave a voice and say, please, I'm attending a very busy meeting. After the tone, leave your message. I will attend to you at night when I return home. That's a voicemail. It is unpopular because some people look at it as something rude, but it is actually useful if you know much about communication. Teleconferences, we can actually use telecommunication and be able to connect several people to our phones, and we can have communication between two or more persons from different cities. Video conferencing could be like what we are going to use now, the Zoom system of, I use my laptop, you use your phones or laptops, and we connect to video and audio, and we are able to understand the communication even if we are far away from each other. So these are some of the interpersonal communication methods that you should do much research about. I know most of you are very good at information technology. You should be able to study these and understand them clearly. So evaluating communication methods, we shall use the following 14 methods of evaluation. If feedback is fast, then that's good. If feedback can be got immediately, that method is good. If it is complex, it may not be good. A complex method of communication may not actually convey the message we want. Breadth means how wide it reaches. Are we going to use radio, telephone, TV, newspapers, or walk house to house? So we take the one which covers the biggest. It depends. If we are actually want to cover the whole country, we may be able to use radio and television. Confidentiality. Confidentiality may actually require us having a conversation face to face, because if I use a telephone, I can't be sure that my message will be safe. If it is a confidential method, on how to endeavor to travel to the person to whom I want the message to be given and talk to him or her face to face. Encoding is if understanding the message coming from the sender is difficult, then that method of communication is not easy. Decoding, also understanding the message by the receiver to send a feedback. If it is difficult, then the method is bad. Time space, if it takes a long time, it is not good. It should take a short time for the message to be seen. A constraint, if it involves a lot of difficulties to communicate, maybe we have to connect a lot of things for us to actually convey the message, then it is not a good method of communication. Cost, if the cost is high, it is not okay. It is effective to use telephone to communicate, but it's expensive. So you have to work away and see if you are able to afford the cost. 10, interpersonal warmth. It is also important that when you meet a person face to face, the message is more understood. There is that kind of closeness. We are calling it interpersonal warmth. Somebody will actually understand you better than if you only write an email. If you talk to him direct, it will be interpersonal warmth. Formality. Formality is very important. Sometimes you may not be able to call your boss to tell him you are absent because he said formally you have to write to me or come in person and explain why you are not going to work the following day. Scannability means understanding of the message. If the message can't be understood, then if you use that kind of communication, it may not be good for us. Time consumption. If it takes a lot of time, then the message is not good. The communication method is not good. Yeah. Let's briefly look at what we call nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is communication that is transmitted without words. We may use sounds with specific meanings or warnings. We can use images that control or encourage a behavior. On your right, you can see nonverbal communication. Some young lady is telling you, keep quiet. That's a symbol of saying silent. Be silent or keep quiet. Sometimes clothing and physical surrounding that imply a status. If your house is full of luxuries, it means you're communicating you're an expensive person. If you put on expensive clothes, you're communicating you're rich. If you put on glittering clothes, it's a communication you're going for a wedding or a party. If you put on plain shoes, black shoes, plain clothes, that could be office work. Okay, sometimes associational behaviors that convey meetings, the way you arrange the class in a circle, it means you're going to have a discussion where you have to brainstorm amongst the members. Nonverbal communication, we can use body language and gestures. You can make your facial expression frowning the face to show you're not happy. You nod the head to show that you are accepting or you're happy. You nod sideways, meaning I don't accept what you're talking about. Sometimes we can use a verbal intonation. This is the change of the voice of the speaker. Some words are emphasized, some phrases are stressed, others are not stressed. Thanks for being a good listener. We've come to the end of Introduction to Communication Skills. I will immediately give you coursework because this semester is short. It's short, the summer semester. So you have to answer the questions before you. What is communication? It will earn you 3 marks if you pass it. Explain the difference between interpersonal communication and organizational communication. You will earn 9 marks if you pass it. Discuss the functions of communication, 8 marks. You have not more than 7 days to hand in this assignment, and hand into this, send it to this email, buyera.said@yahoo.com. Thanks for being a good listener. Like this video, subscribe, share it so that you can continue getting similar lectures. Okay, we shall have our next lecture using Zoom. As long as the pandemic continues to exist among us, we may not actually meet face to face, but we shall effectively get the lecture. So thanks a lot. Like the video, subscribe. Good morning to all of you.